Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was born as one of a group of triplet sisters in Zurich in 1926. Like many of her generation, World War II highly influenced her and her thinking. She was a doctor, and in 1945 she began helping those who had been affected by the war. She spent some time examining the concentration camp Majdanek and witnessed that many of the prisoners faced their impending deaths by carving on the walls, many of them carving butterflies. This inspired her to look at death and dying in a new way. The five stages of grief are so ingrained in the public mind that it is difficult to imagine thinking about death and dying without them. However, Kubler-Ross's ideas were quite revolutionary in 1969 when she first published on death and dying. In fact, shortly before her death in 2004, Time magazine named her one of the century's greatest minds in their list of great scientific thinkers. The essay on the fear of death is the opening chapter to her pivotal first book on death and dying.
Kubler-Ross asked the readers at the end of the story, are we becoming less human or more human? What do you think she means by this? Kubler-Ross means that death is becoming more normalized and is not respected as much as it should be. Her examples are, people just end up in hospitals and then they are pronounced dead. When people are expected to die, they are treated less and less like humans. Also, the author is asking if we are improving or going backwards with the way we are handling life as a whole, including death. Are we going backwards? Are we normalizing in a way that makes sense, or are we normalizing in a way that is good enough for each individual person, and not as a whole? But other people have different opinions on this question.
However, the essay also shows that we are regressing and becoming less human ever since technology was introduced. Our lives have been much easier over the years with the simplicity and convenience of phones and other things. People have gotten lazier and want the easy way out. New technology is taking away human jobs, but the advancement of technology is not always a bad thing. It can solve problems that we can't, and it may also save people's lives. Technology has its pros and cons depending on the situation. Is technology taking over and making us less human, or are people not trying like they used to because of the advancement of technology?
Kubler-Ross chose to entitle this selection on fear of death for multiple reasons. The first and most basic reason is simply that the topic of the essay is death and how different people view death. She named it On the Fear of Death for more than just one reason. Her essay did not just focus on the fear itself, it focuses on us. She mentioned fear, but it was much more than that. It is also the glorification and stigma surrounding death in our society. She also talks about how we as a society tend to shield or sugarcoat death.
The author talks about how the changing of lifestyles and decades have influenced the way children and adults view the ways of death and grieving. She does this by choosing to include examples to show how different cultures and time periods have and do view death. A third reason was that Kubler-Ross entitled this essay On Fear of Death because it talks about dying the old-fashioned way. Nowadays, people are dying with technology around them and not the people that they love. That is even more evident with the rise of COVID and not being able to have family present around them. The last reason was that Kubler-Ross entitled this selection On Fear of Death because the text goes through experiences of death, how perspectives are changed about the topic of death, and many other death-involved subjects.
Kubler-Ross opened the story with the poem to signify the importance of the subject. The poem talked about finding strength and not letting weakness get the better of the reader. Kubler-Ross also opened her story with this poem to lighten the mood of the reader and to make sure that the heavy subject of death doesn't block the view that is being portrayed in the story. Despite all of this, the poem signifies strength in being alone by stating, "Let me not look for allies in life's battlefield, but to my own strength." Now, Kubler-Ross doesn't mean to say do everything on your own. She simply means that don't rely on other people to do things for you and to try and give the issue a shot by yourself at first, and then, if you fail, feel free to get help from others. This is proven by this quote in the poem, "But let me find the grasp of your hand at my failure." Now, this fits Kubler-Ross's story about death extremely well. Death is something that many people mainly experience on their own. However, when people realize they are struggling and cannot deal with the harmful effects death has, they can lean on each other to get better. The important part of this is they face it alone in the beginning. They don't rely on others to fix their problems until they know they cannot do it alone. The poem also explains why one might refuse any help with problems when they first begin out of fear that they might be looked at as a coward. This is also supported in the poem given that it states, "Grant me that I may not be a coward."